Part 3. Building a framework for understanding ourselves. At the start of this book, I said it would be a step-by-step guide in the process of adapting yourself to the trading environment. The first step in this process of adaptation is recognizing the need to adapt. If you can't manipulate or force the markets to change in a way that suits your needs, then you will need to learn how to change yourself to suit the conditions. The market places no limits or constraints on the ways in which you choose to express yourself. In that respect, unlike in the cultural environment, you have all the power. The primary purpose of Part 2, the nature of the trading environment from a psychological perspective, was to point out some of the vast differences between the trading environment and the social environment we were taught to function in, and to demonstrate clearly a need for a new perspective. The next two steps in this process are to learn how to identify exactly what changes you need to make to function successfully in the trading environment, and 2, how to effect any mental changes that are necessary. Manipulating the physical environment is as easy as moving a chair from one place to another because that's where you want or need to sit. However, to consciously change yourself to function more effectively in a market environment that will not respond to your attempts to manipulate it will require a thorough understanding of the nature and functioning of your mental environment. The types of changes you will need to make will fall into two broad categories. First, you will need to learn some sophisticated mental skills to adapt yourself more readily to the constant changes with which the market confronts you, which will require neutralizing some commonly held cultural beliefs about success. These are the beliefs that have the potential to distort market information. Second, you will likely need to undo any psychological injury you may have sustained from your previous trading activity. Any psychological injury diminishes your capacity to execute your trades properly. There are obviously a multitude of sub-steps to learn how to identify what you need to learn, what you need to change, and how to make those changes. The 6 chapters in this part are organized to take you through this process of adaptation by providing you with the insight you will need to understand what you have to do and why. The first thing you will need is a structural framework to make the things that go on in your mental environment more tangible and concrete. To give you this framework, I will describe, define, and organize the component parts of the mental environment into a manageable context to where you can 1. Understand your behavior, 2. Learn the various techniques for manipulating your mental environment at your conscious direction to be more consistent with the environmental conditions and your goals, and 3. Learn how to monitor your relationship with the exterior environment. It is essential that you learn how to monitor your relationship between the interior and exterior environment, because our goals, intents, expectations, needs, and wants are all component parts of our mental environment that we project out into the physical environment for fulfillment in some future moment. In other words, they are all components of the mental environment that either happen or don't happen in the outside physical world. You need to be able to recognize immediately, especially as a trader, when you have the potential to distort the outside information to be consistent with the inner components. These distortions will inevitably result in pain and psychological injury. What I intend to demonstrate in the following chapters is, even though you cannot turn your eyes inward to actually see these mental component parts of the mental environment, it doesn't make them any less real. Besides, it isn't necessary to turn our eyes inward, because we can just as easily learn to define what is inside of our mental environment by what we see and experience in the outside physical environment. By making the connection between what we believe and what we experience, it will be a lot easier to change what we experience by learning how to manipulate our beliefs. We will examine the nature of beliefs and how they act as environmental information management systems. I will demonstrate how our individual beliefs about the nature of the market, and our expectations of what it will do next, manage and control the type and quality of information we perceive about it. By breaking down the dynamics of perception, you will be able to identify the various ways in which all of us place mental limitations on the market's behavior, and how these limitations cause us to distort market information. We will thoroughly explore the nature of fear and how it compels all of us to act without a perception of choice. The predominant underlying force behind most traders' actions causing prices to move is fear. The fear of missing out, competing for the supply, and the fear of loss. If you really want to understand the market's behavior to anticipate what it will do next, then you will first have to learn about and understand the underlying forces beneath your own behavior and how you process and manage information. When you understand how any number of typical market-related fears operate in your life and learn to release yourself from them, you will, in effect, be separating yourself from the crowd. When you separate yourself from the crowd and expand what you know about the forces affecting your behavior to encompass the group, it will be much easier to anticipate what the group will do, because they will merely represent a larger, collective, version of the way you used to be. In other words, You will know how other traders will behave before they do because you will be able to observe them from a detached perspective, due to your having evolved beyond the choiceless state of operating out of fear. As you gain in your understanding of how beliefs interact with environmental information to control your perception and form your experience, along with learning how to distinguish between wishful thinking and what the market is indicating about itself, you will eventually be able to learn how to control your perception of the market activity in a way that allows you the greatest amount of mental flexibility, where you will be able to shift your perspective to flow with the markets and execute your trades without hesitation. If you can't change or control what the market is doing, then the only option you have left is to control yourself in a way that allows you to perceive what the market may do next with increased clarity and objectivity, requiring a thorough working knowledge of the nature of your inner environment in relationship to the outer physical environment. Chapter 9. Understanding the nature of the mental environment. Understanding yourself and learning how to function inside your mental environment is not as difficult as you may think it is. It does, however, require that you gain a thorough understanding of the general characteristics of the mental environment, its component parts, and how they work, which is exactly what this part of the book is designed to give you. The only reason why any of this would seem so difficult is because we aren't taught how to do it when we are young. In fact, we are usually taught exactly the opposite, that the mental environment is a mysterious place that can't be understood. As a result, we end up defining mental components in a haphazard fashion without ever really understanding the relationship between the components, or the relationship these components have with the outside physical environment in the ways that determine how we experience our lives. So, if you are going to consciously transform or adapt yourself to function more effectively as a trader, you will need a very fundamental and practical understanding of the nature of these mental components and how they operate. As will be explained in a moment, there are vast differences in the characteristics of the mental environment, inner, and physical environment, outer, in which our bodies occupy space. Understanding these differences is a key ingredient in the process of changing yourself. As a simple example, the book you are reading exists on the outside of you, whereas the label of book, i.e., your mind's perception of the book, or any other thoughts or sensations you would experience as a result of that label and the meaning you attach is all occurring on the inside of you. Anything that goes on or that happens on the inside of you would constitute your mental environment. All your experiences and memories of those experiences, all your beliefs, all the emotional energy attached to those beliefs, all your feelings, needs, wants, expectations, and goals, and all your thoughts, regardless of whether or not you have expressed these thoughts into the environment, make up your mental landscape. However, before we explore the differences between the inner and outer environments, I want to point out one characteristic common to the two. They are both constructed of many independently functioning parts. Regions would be a better word to describe the inner environment, that cooperate to make up the whole. Most people are very familiar with their body parts, even the ones enclosed within the body cavity. These parts are made up of cells that have distinct functions. They operate independently and cooperate with the other body parts. The sum total of these cooperating parts is our body. A simple illustration would be that eyes are not ears or lungs, they are distinct parts having unique functions within the whole. By the same token, the mental environment is composed of a number of cooperative but independently functioning regions that make up the whole of who we are. For example, a belief is not a dream, nor is a thought an emotion. Beliefs, dreams, thoughts, and emotions are all separate parts of the mental environment that interact in the same manner, at least conceptually, that your hands will interact with your eyes or your finger with your nose or your lungs with your heart. I am pointing this out because most people do not think of their mental environments in such specific ways with highly refined distinctions among the various regions and the ways the components within those regions function. The following list provides some of the categories into which I have divided the mental environment and the components associated with each category that will be explained in the next 5 chapters. Positively charged emotions: love, happiness, joy, confidence, peace, acceptance. Negatively charged emotions: fear, anger, hatred, jealousy, disappointment, confusion, impatience, stress, anxiety, betrayal. Illusions: denials, rationalizations, intellectualizations, distortions. Beliefs: intents, goals, aspirations, expectations, wants, desires, demands, needs. Dreams: sleeping dreams, daydreams. Thoughts: attractions, memories, creativity, intuition. This is not intended to represent a complete list of components and categories of the mental environment. However, it is comprehensive enough to serve the objectives of this book, which is to give you enough of a working knowledge of how they operate and interact to effect any changes you determine are necessary to trade successfully. What exactly is the mental, inner, environment? I am defining the mental environment as a place where all the sensory information from the physical environment, sensory information being the way in which the physical environment acts as a force on our eyes, ears, nose, taste, and touch, gets sorted, categorized, labeled, organized, associated with, and stored. Beliefs are formed and meanings get attached. The mental environment is where our experiences of the outside world form into a complex belief structure about the nature of the physical environment and our relationship with it. There are two things that I want you to note about this definition. First, it is limited, because it doesn't take into account mental activities that generate from within, exclusive of outside sensory information. This is something I will expand on later. Second, I am not including the brain as part of the mental environment, even though the activity of the mental environment takes place inside of the brain. Why I am not including it will become clear in a moment. One of the first characteristics you may notice about the mental components listed is that they are all intangible. You can't see, hear, touch, taste, or smell them, at least not as they exist in the mental environment. For example, no surgeon operating on living brain tissue has ever encountered his patient's beliefs, thoughts, dreams, or memories, even though he knew they were in there somewhere. Biochemists have discovered DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, while working at the molecular level of tissue makeup and as of yet have not encountered one of the mental components listed earlier. Yet we know they exist because we can experience the results of someone's beliefs or thoughts as they are expressed outwardly in the physical environment through their behavior. Now, for those of you who are asking yourself how do these mental components exist if they aren't tangible and no one has ever directly experienced them? The answer is, they exist as a form of energy, and energy doesn't have mass. For example, light will pass through physical objects or reflect off them, but light will not displace anything, and electricity will pass through objects, not displace them. Entities made up of atoms and molecules will displace one another as they move into each other's space. For a long time the scientific community believed that the atom was the smallest, most fundamental building block of existence, only to discover later that within an atom is energy. What scientists haven't figured out yet is how does something that exists without mass, the energy within the atom, become something that does have mass, the atom. In other words, how does energy go from being non-physical to physical? Albert Einstein was once asked to give his definition of matter and he said matter is merely energy in a form that we can perceive by our senses. Even at the atomic level, the book you are now reading and the chair you are sitting on to read it appear to your senses as if they are solid. However, that is not the case at all. Our senses cannot perceive things as they exist at the atomic level where everything is spinning and there is space between the atoms. However, the point I am making is that all matter exists as energy at the very deepest level of existence, within the atom, but not all energy exists as matter, as with light and electricity. In very general terms, mental energy, as it exists in its various, intangible forms as beliefs, feelings, emotions, and so on has the potential to act as a force on our behavior and consequently as a force on the outside physical environment corresponding to the way in which this energy is expressed. For example, mental energy in the form of a belief or memory of an experience can motivate a person to walk across a room to change the channel on his television set because he believes a program on another channel is more worthwhile or pleasurable, bid the price of a stock higher than the last price because he believes it serves his best interests, or motivate masses of people to go to war to defend or promote whatever they believe needs to be defended or promoted. These actions and their effects on the environment are the result of this mental energy expressed outwardly. What is experience? The world with our 5 physical senses. This is common knowledge. But, when you get down to the very basics, what actually happens to our experiences of the environment as they go from the outer, physical, to the inner, mental, environment? What we see, hear, touch, taste, and smell at a physical level is transformed into electrical impulses of energy and is sent to the brain via the nervous system. That is, at the most basic level, tangible experience of the outside world is transformed into intangible electrical energy, meaning that the tangible medium where we experience our lives, the physical environment, does not have the same characteristics and properties of the medium that represents and stores these experiences on the inside of us, the mental environment. We will examine these differences on a more practical level in a moment. If, at first, it seems preposterous to think that our experiences, environmental information, are transformed into electrical energy, then consider that we have been using an analogous form of technology mechanically for years in the form of telephones and computers. Computers store information, sounds, and images in a number of different energy media. Telephones transport sounds and images in the form of electricity, light, or microwaves. As commonplace as all this is, there is still something fascinating about a living process that transforms sensory information, tangible experience, into electricity and stores it that way. Everything that we have learned, as individuals, about the nature of our existence is stored in our mental environment at an intangible level. In a non-physical reality, energy is real, yet it is non-physical because it doesn't consist of atoms and molecules. Thus it can be said that energy exists in a non-physical reality. Earlier, I did not include the brain as part of the mental environment because it exists at the tangible level of atoms and molecules, physical reality, whereas the mental environment, energy in the form of beliefs, memories, emotions, and so on, about the nature of physical environment resulting from our experiences, does not exist at this tangible level. To help you understand this distinction between the brain and the mental environment, consider that the brain exclusive of the mental environment is no different from a computer that is not plugged into some electrical power source. In this analogy, the mental environment would correspond to the electrical energy that makes the computer run as well as store and carry the various forms of information the computer is designed to handle, and the computer hardware, physical, mechanical, atoms, and molecules, would correspond to the brain. This is the reason why I stated in the beginning of the chapter that there are vast differences between the mental and physical environments. All the mental components I listed exist at the intangible level of energy and, more important, function with the same properties and characteristics of energy. To understand the nature of the mental environment, you need to understand the characteristics of energy. Thus, what I intend to do next is examine the properties and characteristics of typical energy forms like light and electricity, and then compare them to the characteristics of the mental environment to establish a correspondence between the two. Finally, in the next 5 chapters I will tie all this material together to give you some very practical techniques to improve your ability to trade effectively. How does the mental environment correspond to the characteristics and properties of energy? Energy is non-dimensional. As we already know, energy doesn't take up space in the physical environment because it doesn't displace anything that does take up space. This no-space characteristic of energy gives it a non-dimensional quality. In other words, anything that doesn't take up space also won't have any tangible dimensions of height, length, width, or circumference, at least not in the ways in which we would normally think of these properties. This non-dimensional quality is probably the hardest concept to grasp about the nature of energy, because even though energy is non-dimensional, it can take some form that is visible to our eyes, and anything that is visible should have dimensions that we can measure. It may seem like an obvious contradiction to say that energy can take a visible form and yet still not have dimension, but it is not. The best example to illustrate this is with holograms or holographic photography. With a holographic process you can create a 3-dimensional image in light projected into space that can be seen with the eyes, and it will appear to have length, width, and circumference. You could even measure the length or width of the image. However, your hands would pass right through the image if you tried, because there really isn't anything there, at least not in a physical sense. Images in light have no physical substance, so from a physical perspective, they also don't have any dimension. Relative to physical objects, energy doesn't have dimension. Memories or mental images, anything that we can see with our inner eye, like visualizations, daydreams, or night dreams, could operate very much like a hologram of laser light, an image of light that has no physical substance, where space as it relates to distance or dimension is not a consideration. The total area available inside of our skulls is quite small, especially in relationship to what will fit from a mental perspective. We can create mental images of any size or proportion, with none of the dimensional limitations that exist in the physical environment, because these images, as an energy form, have no physical substance and thus exist in a state of form without dimension, taking up no space. You can easily demonstrate this concept with a simple mental exercise. Close your eyes and picture the last place where you went on a vacation. Where did you stay? What side trips did you take? When you imagined where you went, did you get up and move from your present location in the physical environment? Did you imagine yourself getting up out of your chair to make all the preparations that would be necessary for such a trip? Did you get in your car and mentally drive each mile to your destination, as you would if you were actually going? Probably not. The image of your last vacation most likely just popped into your consciousness. It is as if you were instantaneously transported to these locations, without regard to the space or distance that you would need to travel to get there in the physical environment. There was no space between your present location and the image of the vacation spot you hold in your memories. The nature of our dreams also illustrates this non-dimensional characteristic. First, there is no known limit to the type of dream landscape we could find ourselves in. Dreams can be as varied and diverse, if not more so, as the physical environment, and all much larger than the space available inside of our skull cavity. Furthermore, in our dreams we can instantaneously change locations without actually traveling any distance. For example, you could dream that you are in the basement of your house and then in the next instant be in your living room, without actually having walked up your basement stairs or through other rooms to get to there. Speed. The second characteristic the mental environment shares with energy is speed. Energy travels at an incredibly high rate of speed. Light, for example, travels at a rate of 186,000 miles per second, fast enough to travel around the Earth approximately 8 times in 1 second. This is so fast that to our physical senses, it appears instantaneous or simultaneous. What I mean is, it moves so fast that our physical senses cannot detect the motion. Obviously, we can see the light, but we cannot actually see it moving from any given source to some distant point. For example, when you turn on a light in a dark room, does the room become illuminated in stages as the light travels from its source to the walls? No. To our eyes the room fills with light instantaneously, seeming to be everywhere at once, in a flash. Our eyes are not constructed in a manner where we can make any distinctions in movement, so it seems as if it doesn't move at all. This instantaneous characteristic of light relates quite well to the mental environment. As I pointed out earlier, dream travel can be and usually is instantaneous. While you're having a dream, in one instant you could be in a house and the next you could be on the other side of the world. There really isn't any travel time between these dream locations. Whatever mental mechanism prompts the change, it creates a simultaneous transfer, probably taking as much physical clock time as it does for light to fill up a dark room. However, there is another mental characteristic, actually more of a phenomenon, that best illustrates the speed at which the mental environment operates. This is something that is not experienced by very many people, but nevertheless reported by enough people in completely separate, unrelated incidents to confirm its validity. What I am referring to is the phenomenon of having one's life flash before one's consciousness in the form of a continuous mental image, from birth to the present. Something like this usually only happens in extreme life-threatening situations where the person believes that he is only moments from death. In those few moments before the expected death, the sights, sounds, tastes, smells, feelings, and emotions of one's entire life are re-experienced. Personally, whenever I've read of or heard someone's recounting of such an experience, it baffled me. I didn't understand how a person's whole life could scroll before his consciousness in a matter of moments, when it took years to experience. However, after a great deal of contemplation, it occurred to me that the energy in which our experiences are stored moves at speeds that are so incredibly fast that it would make our lives seem quite short in comparison, thus making it possible for all our experiences to scroll by in moments, regardless of how long it took actually to have the experiences. All this might be a little easier to understand if you imagine, as I did, experiences stored in a stream of light very much like what you would see when you look at a distant star. There is a very good correlation here. For example, scientists tell us that many of the closest stars to the Earth, other than our Sun, are so far away, that even at the incredible speed of 186,000 miles per second, it still takes the light emanating from these stars hundreds of years to reach the Earth. This distance between the stars and Earth is so vast that it creates a steady beam of light, billions of trillions of miles long. So, when we look at any star other than our Sun, what we are actually seeing is the light that left it hundreds or even thousands of years ago. Thus what we are seeing is light from the star's distant past. Now, if we could travel along this beam of light back to its source, what we would be seeing is light from the star's more recent past, or future from the perspective of traveling toward the star, the closer that we got to it, until we arrived at the star's present. Light from the past, future, depending on one's perspective, and present would exist simultaneously within that beam. Now, imagine the sights, sounds, tastes, smells, feelings, and emotions of our experiences stored in energy as a stream of memories that we can travel along very much like this beam of light, where we can use our consciousness to roam between the distant past to the more recent past up to the present moment or project these memories out into the future. If the energy in which our experiences are stored can move at speeds that are equal to or approach the speed of light, then it would offer a credible explanation as to how it is possible for one's whole life to scroll before one's consciousness in a matter of moments. To illustrate this for yourself further, imagine all your experiences stretched out like a beam of light that you could travel along at the speed of light. At that speed, at even a couple of seconds of travel time, you could get through a great deal of information. For example, if we just arbitrarily decided that it took 10,000 miles of mental energy stretched out to hold 1 year's worth of experience, then, at the speed of light, you could get through almost 19 years of memories in 1 second. Recognition of this phenomenon helps us to grasp one of the most difficult concepts about the nature of the mental environment, that it exists outside of time, as we know it. That is, our physical senses lock us into perceiving an environment bounded by the limitations of time and three-dimensional space. We have to experience each moment in a linear sequence. We can't go backward and experience the past as it existed in the physical environment. Once it passes, it's gone forever. Nor can we move ahead into the future. The past doesn't exist anymore, and the future doesn't exist yet. What does exist are these seemingly endless sequences of now moments in which we experience our lives. However, the mental energy our inner components consist of operates outside of our normal concept of time and space as it is experienced in the physical environment. In the mental environment there are no spatial boundaries or time constraints. We can think in any direction we please, past, present, or future. And, theoretically, there would be no limits or boundaries as to how much information could be stored. Simply stated, time is a function of our perception of movement over distance or three-dimensional space. In other words, to perceive time, you need two key components: space that has dimensions, and movement. Both these properties obviously exist in the physical environment. It has characteristics of three-dimensional space consisting of length, height, width or thickness, and circumference. Also, the physical environment is in constant motion. The sun, other stars, the planets, and their moons are all in motion. And even though we can't directly perceive it, everything physical is in motion at the atomic and molecular level. Everything is spinning around something larger, from the tiniest atoms and molecules to the largest stars and solar systems, including the atoms and molecules in our own bodies. This spinning motion of the Earth and its orbit around the Sun acts as a force on the environment, changing day to night and night to day, creating the weather and the seasons as well as an endless number of other environmental cycles. All these cycles of environmental changes, including our own bodily cycles of growth, age, respiration, digestion, and so on, resulting from the movement of the atoms and molecules of our cells, act as a force on our physical senses, causing us to experience a constantly changing environment, one cycle after another, in straight linear fashion, thus giving us our perception of time that is always moving forward. If we couldn't perceive motion or some sort of movement over three-dimensional space to act as reference points to measure this movement, then we wouldn't be able to perceive the passing of time. For example, if we were conscious but somehow fixed in a state of suspended animation where we had no sensory input, no perception of movement of any kind, not even a heartbeat, it would be impossible to tell the difference between a few seconds or a few days. To measure time, you need a point to start from and a point to get to. These points can be measured off in distance or time, but you need three-dimensional space to get your points. We think in an environment that is more like a stream where our consciousness can roam freely between the past, present, and future without regard to time or space. Furthermore, the actual sequences of moments that exist in the physical environment have no effect on the energy our memories are stored in. Sequences of time only have an effect on the mental environment relative to the impact the environment is having on our senses in energy terms. You can easily demonstrate this to yourself by trying to reconstruct from your memory the last 24 hours, moment for moment. Difficult, isn't it? Now try to do it for a week ago today. The only things we remember are the significant events, the experiences that had the most impact on our senses, the ones with the most energy connected with them. That's because experiences are not recorded in our memories as moments of time. They are stored as charges of energy, and as such they have no relationship to the passing of physical clock time. Remember, energy doesn't exist as atoms and molecules, and therefore relative to our perception of the passing of time, it is not subjected to this non-stop spinning of everything that is physical. Energy can remain static or be active. For example, someone or something could remind you of an experience that happened 20 years ago, an experience that you haven't thought of since it happened. When you tap into the energy of those memories, you will re-experience the sights, sounds, tastes, smells, and most important, the emotions of that time, as if nothing had changed. In your mind nothing has changed. The energy remained dormant for 20 years. It becomes active either when we choose to think or reflect about what is inside of us or when we are inadvertently reminded of what is inside of us. Significantly positive, pleasurable, happy, joyful, etc., or negative, painful, terrorizing, angry, hateful, experiences are easily recalled because of the amount or intensity of the energy involved with the event. These types of experiences will pop into our conscious recollection, at will. But, try to remember every time in your life that you brushed your teeth, took a drink of water, opened your refrigerator door, or put your shoes and socks on, and it's not so easy. These events are difficult to recall because there is very little energy connected with each of these types of experiences. Our memories are like pockets of energy that we may organize chronologically by date and time, as in the stream of light example. However, all the uneventful moments between the eventful moments seem to disappear without a trace or get compressed as if they never happened, even though we know that they did. We must have put on our shoes and socks a month ago today because we probably would remember walking around without them. That might be significant enough to remember. What we read, as an example, is usually quickly forgotten because there is very little impact the environment is having on our senses. Printed words on a page have very little visual impact in relationship to activities of a more experiential nature. For example, actually participating in a biology experiment will have a much greater impact from an energy perspective than will reading about one. The energy required to remember something that we read has to be generated from within in the form of concentration. So, the way in which we experience clock time is in relationship to what we are feeling, either physical or emotional impact, in any given moment. If, for example, you were experiencing terror, each second of clock time could easily seem like an hour or day. Each moment of a terrorizing experience seems to last forever because the environment is assaulting our senses. The impact is so painful that we can't wait for the experience to end to be out of that situation. We would therefore focus our attention on how long the event is lasting, while we were waiting for it to end, thus slowing down our sense of time. Pleasurable experiences seem to fly by. We have no concept of time passing, because we are in a state of joy and happiness, and nothing takes us out of these moments to feel something less than the joy. We come out of that state of mind when the experience starts to diminish in its degree of happiness, causing us to focus more on the unpleasantness of what we are experiencing, some degree less than joy, even if it is boredom, compared to the happiness we are feeling. When our focus shifts from joy, no concept of time passing, to I can't wait for this to end, our sense of time slows down in proportion to the unpleasantness of the experience. In the physical environment, experiences take place in moments of time that pass one after another, in linear fashion. What we experience in moments of time, through our physical senses, is transformed into electrical energy and stored as a memory relative to the degree of impact of the experience. Memories don't have any restrictions imposed on them by time because energy isn't physical. Time is one-directional, whereas in our mental environment we are free to think about our memories at will or by just wanting to. We can experience them as a mental image. Pleasurable experiences seem to fly by. We have no concept of time passing, because we are in a state of joy and happiness, and nothing takes us out of these moments to feel something less than the joy. We come out of that state of mind when the experience starts to diminish in its degree of happiness, causing us to focus more on the unpleasantness of what we are experiencing, some degree less than joy, even if it is boredom, compared to the happiness we are feeling. When our focus shifts from joy, no concept of time passing, to I can't wait for this to end, our sense of time slows down in proportion to the unpleasantness of the experience. In the physical environment, experiences take place in moments of time that pass one after another, in linear fashion. What we experience in moments of time, through our physical senses, is transformed into electrical energy and stored as a memory relative to the degree of impact of the experience. Memories don't have any restrictions imposed on them by time because energy isn't physical. Time is one-directional, whereas in our mental environment we are free to think about our memories at will or by just wanting to. We can experience them as a mental image, mental sounds, mental tastes, and so on. Each of our memories makes up a part of our identity, and because they exist as an energy form, they have the potential to act as a force on our behavior. Regardless of whether we are conscious of these specific forces or not, they cause us to move through the environment in certain ways corresponding to what we have already experienced to create more experiences and more memories. Essentially, what I am stating is that our existence straddles two very different dimensions simultaneously. We live in and perceive three-dimensional space, and, as a result, our physical senses are subject to the limitations of time, where one moment passes after another in straight linear fashion. Whereas we think in a dimension where time and space as it is perceived in the physical environment doesn't exist. Now, there are some very important psychological implications within the concept that time and space don't exist in the mental environment, implications that have to do with our ability to experience happiness, fulfill our needs, and achieve our goals, which are all basically synonymous. However, Before we address these implications, you will need to understand how experiences are stored in varying degrees of positively or negatively charged energy. What I call the quality of energy our memories are stored in.
Thank you for watching. Share this with friends and family, and please subscribe.